It's a delight for me to speak about opportunity because I'm the risk doctor. Risk is, I think, the most important thing that anybody can do when they're managing projects or programs or portfolios, businesses, organizations, or in fact, any of the challenges in life. Because we plan to succeed, and the things that stop us succeeding are the things we didn't plan for. The things we hadn't expected, the things we weren't ready for, we had nothing in our toolbox to deal with. Of course, those things are risks. And so the thing that makes the difference between success and failure is our ability to manage risk successfully and effectively. So it's really important that we understand how to manage risk, but I want to explain to you how that is linked to creating silver linings and having a mindset, a way of thinking that includes opportunity. And I'm basing this, of course, on the PM² methodology. I wasn't involved in its development, but I've been aware of it and watching it for some time, and delighted to see so much interest in its launch. So let's start with some basic ideas. We all know that risk is everywhere. Everything we do that's worth doing is risky. That includes at the strategic or the organizational level, where we have to take risks in order to create benefits and value, in order to generate rewards. And there is a balance between risk and reward. If you take no risk and you play it safe always, then you don't have the opportunity to make the big changes, the big innovations, which we need to make in order to create value. So risk-taking is linked to value. If we take too little risk, then we don't create enough value. If we take too much risk, then the danger is that we bet the farm, that we do something which we can't cope with and end up having a major disaster on our hands. Not just at the strategic level, but in terms of the choice of activities that we make, our portfolios, we have to choose to do the right things and then do those things right. And then at the projects and operational levels, again, we have to take risk appropriately, take the right risks safely, because zero risk is neither an option nor desirable. It's not something that anybody wants to do, to have a zero risk project, because it will be really boring. All projects are risky because they're unique and complex based on dependencies and assumptions, delivering change through people. All of those things, those 6 things, each of them introduce risk into our projects. Unique, complex, dependencies, assumptions, change, and people. And if we took all of those things away and we did something which was not unique, which wasn't introducing any sort of change, that was very simple, that was done by machines or robots and not people, it wouldn't be a project. It would be operations, or it would be some kind of machine. Instead of which, we're trying to do something quite difficult in the world of projects, and that is necessarily risky. So we need to make sure that we take the right risks, but take the right risks safely. And if I went around the room and asked some of you to define what you meant by risk, I guess we'd have a number of different answers, but all of you would have the same kind of idea in your head. It's some big, ugly thing which is out there threatening you. It's threatening to squash you, to make your life very difficult. You might have the job that this guy in the Chinese army has. It's a real job. I wouldn't like that job, but as a project manager, often we find the target is painted here and people are aiming right here, and that's not a comfortable place to be. Or you know that there's just something out there waiting to get you as you go through your project, and eventually you'll be eaten, you'll be bitten. That's how we think of risk. But if that's your concept of risk, I'd like to broaden your thinking, to give you a different view of risk, because I think that is wrong. And in order to understand how and why it's wrong, I'd like to go back to basics. What is the difference between risk and uncertainty? I guess we know there is a difference. There are billions of uncertainties in the world. Of course, we don't know how many because they're uncertain. But there are lots and lots of uncertainties, and we don't write them all down in our risk log. We don't include every uncertainty in the world when we think about risks that need to be managed on our projects. Somehow, we define a subset of all the uncertainties in the world to go in our risk log, things that we need to know about, to think about, to analyze, prepare for, and manage proactively. So all risks are uncertain, but not all uncertainties are risks. So how do we decide between these two things to decide which uncertainties pose risks to our projects? I'd like to suggest 3 very simple words to explain the difference between uncertainty and risk. And it's these 3 words. Risk is uncertainty that matters, because most of the uncertainties don't matter. Is it going to rain tomorrow afternoon in Kazakhstan? I don't know. I don't care. It's an uncertainty, it might or it might not. If I was a farmer in Kazakhstan or I was doing some development project in Kazakhstan, maybe it would be relevant to me. But for us here in this room, it's not relevant. It's an uncertainty that doesn't matter. And how do we know what matters? What matters are our objectives, that we deliver the objectives in our projects so that we can deliver outcomes in our programs and portfolios, so we can deliver benefits and value ultimately to our stakeholders. So we have to achieve our objectives. And any uncertainty that has the potential to affect our objectives is an uncertainty that matters. It's a risk. It's something we need to understand, we need to think about, prepare for, and manage proactively so that it doesn't affect our objectives, so that we can achieve them and be successful. So risk is uncertainty that matters. And risk, the idea of risk, connects uncertainty with objectives. If we go to the very first glossary in the PM Squared Methodology Guide, version 1, we have this definition which connects uncertainty with objectives. Risk is an uncertain event or set of events. It may be one thing or a group of things coming together. The key characteristic is it's uncertain. But it's something that if it happens, it matters, because should it occur, it will have an effect on achievement of project objectives. Uncertainty that matters, uncertainty and objectives. But that definition leads us to a very interesting second question. If risk is not the same as uncertainty, risk is uncertainty that matters, what kinds of uncertainties matter? We have two definitions, two dimensions to our definition of risk, the uncertainty dimension and the effect on objectives dimension. So when you want to know how big your risk is, you can ask two questions. How uncertain is it, and how much does it matter? And we might use these words here that we use in the PM Squared methodology: likelihood, which is an assessment or an evaluation of uncertainty, and impact, which is a description of how much it matters. So likelihood and impact are a way of describing or sizing uncertainty that matters, uncertainty and the effect on objectives. But I found this funny picture on the internet, and it's there for a reason, not just to hopefully make you smile, but because I think the mouse is very like a lot of us project managers, and he teaches us something about uncertainty that matters, about risks. You see, this mouse is facing an uncertain situation, and he has done his risk assessment. He's identified an uncertainty that matters. He could be killed or injured. He's seen the trap, and if he springs the trap, then he's going to be hurt or he could even die. So he's done his risk management, first the risk assessment, then the risk management. He's got his little helmet on, and he's going very carefully. And we should do that in our projects. We should find the traps, the things that would waste time, waste money, destroy performance, injure people, reduce reputation. All of these things are traps in our project. We have to protect ourselves and go very carefully. And that's what we do in project management, of course. But there's another uncertainty that matters, which the mouse has noticed, which is really important for him, as important as the trap. That uncertainty is the cheese. Can he get the cheese off the trap? It's not certain. He hopes he can, but what he has to do is to manage two uncertainties at the same time. Don't spring the trap. Don't be killed or injured, but do get the cheese. And we have to do the same in our projects, because our projects exist to get the cheese. So what is cheese in our projects? Cheese means value. Cheese means benefits. Cheese means products and services that people want and need, improving the lives of our stakeholders. That's why we do projects. And getting the cheese out of the project is not certain, because projects are unique and complex, based on dependencies and assumptions, delivering change through people. Projects are risky, so we can't guarantee that we'll create benefits. That's why we do project management. And the challenge for us as project managers is to manage both of these uncertainties that matter. Not only to stop things going wrong on our projects, but also to create benefits. And the real challenge is to do that at the same time. And so we have to ask this question: is there a better way to manage risk on our projects which reduces the likelihood of springing the trap and gets more cheese out? And I'm here to tell you there's always a better way. So we should ask the question, which impacts matter? It's not just the uncertainties that will help us achieve our objective, not just the uncertainties that will harm us or stop us from achieving our objectives, it's also the uncertainties that will help us. Both of these matter, and both of these need to be managed. And so what we need to do is to make sure that we stop things going wrong, of course, but that we also help things go right. And in the world of risk management, both of these things are in scope, because things that might happen that would damage the project are uncertainties that matter. But things that might happen that would help the project are also uncertainties that matter. And both of these need to be identified and managed proactively. We have code words or jargon words for these two things. An uncertainty that might happen, and if it does happen, it hurts us, is called a threat. An uncertainty that might happen, but if it does happen, it helps us, is called an opportunity. Threats and opportunities are the two flavors, the two types, the two sides of risk. So the concept of risk is not only about bad things. And if we go back to our definition of risk in the PM Squared methodology guide, those of you who know it very well, like Nikos and the others, will tell you, you've missed something out. You've missed out 3 words from this definition. And of course, the missing words are cheese and traps. Well, they're not actually cheese and traps, but these are the words, this is the full definition of risk in the glossary of the PM Squared methodology guide. That risk is an uncertain event or set of events, positive or negative, that should it occur will have an effect on achievement of project objectives. So here, right at the very beginning in the glossary of our set of important definitions for PM Squared, we have this concept. Cheese, things that might or might not happen that would help us, that are positive, and traps, things that might or might not occur, but if they happen would hurt us. Threats. And so risk management should include both opportunities and threats. The purpose of risk management is to create a forward-looking radar, to scan the future, to say what is out there coming our way. The things that are further away may be not so clear, they're a little bit fuzzy, they're not very well defined, but at least we can tell how big they are, whether they're good or bad, and if they're coming in our direction. And if you see a big bad thing coming in your direction, you should steer your project away from it, or at least put some protection in place. But if you see a big good thing, and it looks like it might pass you by, you should steer your project towards it, so you can capture the benefits that that big good thing could bring you. So we have an early warning system in risk management for both threats and opportunities. And the purpose of risk management is to minimize threats and maximize opportunities in a single integrated process. That's what we should and could be doing, and that's what the definition of risk in the PM Squared methodology guide glossary is there to tell us. There are positive as well as negative, and the approach is there to deal with both of them. Now, I wonder how many of you have even noticed those 3 words, and how many of you actually agree with them. And if you do notice them, and you have seen that they're part of the methodology, is that something that you're doing? A lot of people are still convinced that risk is always and only bad. Well, if that's true, how are you going to manage the things that are out there that could happen that would save you time, that would save you money, that would enhance performance, that would reduce accidents and incidents, that would increase the benefits that you deliver to your stakeholders? If we don't have a structured way of identifying, prioritizing, and managing opportunities. The risk approach, the risk process, is a structured way of finding opportunities, finding the good ones, and making them happen. So here is the PM Squared risk process, pulled directly from one of the risk management plans. And you'll see it's a set of structured steps. We start with initiating the project, and then we identify risks, we assess them to prioritize, plan and implement responses, and then we control the risk exposure that's left and go round again until we reach the end of the project. This process works perfectly well for both threats and opportunities. We could, in our identification phase, identify opportunities, things that might happen that if they happened would help us. Now, some of those ideas will be stupid. Some of them will never happen. They're just crazy ideas. And some of them will be worth exploring. So we need to have an assessment step that says, out of this list of possible improvements, possible lucky things that could happen, which are the good ones? Which are the ones that would give us the biggest benefit or have the highest likelihood of happening? And which are the ones worth chasing? And having assessed them, we could develop responses to proactively go after those good golden opportunities that could really help us, and then monitor our performance against achieving and capturing those opportunities. So we can use the existing risk process that you know and love. This is the sort of thing you will do on all your projects anyway. We could use this to find opportunities, choose the best ones, and make them happen. And that would be extending the PM squared risk process to incorporate opportunities, to create silver linings in your project where otherwise it might look very dark and stormy. And that's the purpose of the first part of my presentation, to suggest to you how we might extend the PM squared process for risk. I was very pleased to hear people talking about adopting and adapting, about sharing and shaping, and how the goal of the PM squared process, the methodology, is to be tried and improved. Tested means to see if it works, and if not, you do something better. So here we have an opportunity to think about how we might build on the definition in the glossary and to make it happen in real life through our process. So first of all, methodology. We do this because it helps us find opportunities that otherwise we might miss using an existing process. You don't have to design a new opportunity management process. And how good is that for our teams? To have a structured way through workshops and checklists and all these other tools that we have in PM squared, a structured way to find things that will help them deliver their objectives. Wouldn't you want to go to a risk workshop that gave you a list of those things, things that could really help you save time and save money and deliver more easily? Wouldn't that help you sleep better at night? Wouldn't that reduce your stress levels? Wouldn't it be great to have those things that you could work on proactively to make your project more successful? Of course it would. As well as a list of things that, if you're not careful, could trip you up and really damage the project. And of course, we should be working on those as well. So it's motivating for the team to find these opportunities using a structured process. And it helps us, having this structured approach, to be more creative and innovative, to capture opportunities that otherwise might have been missed, and to turn those opportunities into benefits, and ultimately have more successful projects and more successful outcomes. That's what it's for. We don't do this just because it's in a glossary or it's in a methodology. We do it because it helps us deliver on our objectives and create more value and benefits. That's why we include opportunities in the risk process. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Of course you would, wouldn't you? Yes, David. Non-verbal is good. You can do non-verbal, and I'd be very happy with that. So let me just take the 3 steps of the methodology and explain to you very briefly, and obviously we don't have time for lots of detail, about how we can use the existing PM squared risk process to find opportunities, pick the good ones, and make them happen. So first of all, let's think about finding opportunities. Here's a strange statement. Opportunities and threats are the same. What I mean by this is that they are both uncertainties that matter, which means that we should be able to identify them using the same kinds of techniques. The only difference is that one is positive and one is negative. But they are both uncertainties that matter, so we should find them with checklists, with reviews of past projects, with questionnaires, with brainstorming, with all those sort of basic techniques. Why don't we just extend those techniques to look for good things as well as bad things? Well, there's a reason why we don't do that. Most of the time, our techniques that we commonly use are focused on bad things. That may be a question of habit, of familiarity, the things that we're used to doing, or in some cases it's a limitation of the technique itself. It might be better if we had specific 2-dimensional techniques that were designed to find both threats and opportunities within the same technique. Fortunately, there are lots of them, about a dozen or so. And in some of the risk methodology guides, not this one, but others, you can, and certainly on the internet, you can find guidance on what these things look like. Here's a couple of, or 3 suggestions. SWOT analysis. Strengths and weaknesses, what? O is for opportunities and T is for threats. We use SWOT analysis to find opportunities and threats. Normally, SWOT analysis is done at the strategic level to look for internal and external challenges to the organization and its business or its strategy. But we could use it at project level to think about the strengths of our project team, the strengths of our organization, the strengths of our solution, and what opportunities arise from those strengths. To think about our weaknesses of our team and of our culture and of our processes and approach, and think about what threats those might introduce into our projects. We could do project-based SWOT analysis to find both opportunities and threats, and we know how to do that. It's adapting an existing technique to find risks, both good and bad. Or we could analyze our assumptions and constraints. Assumptions generally are things where we hope things will go well, and if an assumption is wrong, it generates a threat. Constraints are things where we're told we can't do certain things, where things are restricted for us. If those turned out to be wrong and we could relax or remove constraints, it might create an opportunity. So by analysing our assumptions and constraints and seeing which ones are fixed and which ones are flexible, and then how much that might help us or hinder us, we can find both threats and opportunities. Standard, simple technique that you could do very easily. You know how to do fault tree analysis. Start with the bad thing, work out what would lead you there, and then the uncertainties that would enhance the drivers of the bad outcome. We could do a benefit tree and think about the good thing and what would lead us there, and then about the uncertainties that would enhance the drivers of the good outcome. We could create a benefit tree in the same way that we create a fault tree, and use one to find the threats and one to find the opportunities. These are very simple, structured techniques because threats and opportunities are the same. The only difference is the sign of the impact, and so we can use similar techniques to explore and expose both types. So that's simple. You could do this. You could start now, if you stop listening to me and start writing down, you could start now thinking about the good things that might happen on your project, which are most likely and which would have the most positive impact. And you could actually make a list before you go out of that door of at least 10 or 20 things that would be really wonderful if they happened, and then assess how likely they are to happen and how good they might be. This is simple. We could do that. You could do a SWOT analysis for your project team, for your particular environment, and for your challenges. Couldn't you? Yes, David. Yes, David. Good, thank you. So what about the second step, the assessment step? We could use the assessment step to choose the best opportunities. Now, in PM squared, you'll see something called a risk assessment thresholds matrix, which starts with, this case has a 1 by 5 scales for likelihood, 5 points for impact, and then each one is defined so you know what you mean by a level 2 likelihood. That means maybe between 10 and 20% chance of happening. A level 3 likelihood is maybe between 20 and 50%. You define that in your risk management plan. You know what level 1, 2, 3 impacts mean against the budget and against the timeline and against the performance. Those are defined in the risk management plan. So we define our scales. Then we calculate a risk level for each risk by saying how likely is it, 1 to 5, and what would the impact be if it happened, 1 to 5. Multiply them together to get a risk level, and then look on the map, look on the matrix to see what sort of risk strategy is appropriate. Red are the urgent ones, yellow are the kind of medium ones to monitor, green are the ones we can leave. You're familiar with this. What do we do for opportunities? Opportunities are the same as threats. The only difference is the sign of the impact. So why don't we use the same approach? We just, on the impact scale, instead of it being a set of bad things, 1 to 5, let's have a set of good things, 1 to 5. Let's say how much time could we save, not lose? How much money could we save, not waste? How much could our performance increase instead of being reduced? These are the same degrees of impact, just made positive. And then we can have bright red opportunities, glowing opportunities, where we have to stop. This is a traffic light system. Red means stop. Red doesn't mean danger. Especially in Asia, red means really great. Red is lucky in Asia, as you know. So red means stop. If you see an opportunity with a high likelihood and a high impact, stop what you're doing. You have to look at this. If you see a green opportunity, low likelihood, low potential impact, just keep going. It doesn't really matter. You'll have the same prioritization scheme for opportunities as for threats. There is one small tweak to the matrix that we might include. It's called the mirror matrix, where you actually flip over the opportunity side. So you bring the two red zones together into the middle by making the impact scale go low to high for threats and then high to low for opportunities to create this kind of double matrix. Why would you do that? Well, it looks pretty. Well, no, not really. Some people call this the butterfly matrix, but the real reason we do it is because it creates a zone of attention. Right in the center of this diagram, we have the hit list, the worst threats and the best opportunities together. That's where we start to pay attention. And as you work out and across the matrix to the outsides, they become less important. So you get the two green zones, you just don't worry. So we can design our response strategies around the position in this matrix, just like you do for threats. This is easy, you could do it. It's in the methodology. So then we prioritize our opportunities. We find the ones that are stupid ideas with a low likelihood, or the ones that are never going to happen, or the ones that won't help us with a low positive impact, and we find the good ones. So now what we need to do is to develop some responses. In the current PM squared methodology, we have 4 standard response strategies. And the idea is you choose a strategy first, and then you turn your strategy into actions. And so we have a choice of 1 to 4. We can avoid a threat, make sure it doesn't happen, or if it does happen, it doesn't affect us. We can transfer it, get somebody else involved to manage it for us, reduce it to make the threat smaller, either lower likelihood or lower negative impact, or accept the threat with a contingency plan. So we have 4 strategies. What could we do for opportunities? I won't say it again, but an opportunity is the same as a threat, just the sign of the impact. So we could do the same sorts of things for opportunities. If we generalize those strategies and say, what are they trying to achieve? The question is, how do we achieve the same things for positive uncertainties? How do we remove uncertainty for an opportunity? We don't want to avoid it. We want to capture it. Or we might use the word exploit. Make it happen. You reduce the uncertainty by making the likelihood of a threat 0, by making the likelihood of an opportunity 100%. It removes the uncertainty. You now know it's going to happen because you've taken an exploiting or capturing strategy. Instead of transferring a threat so somebody takes it away, why don't we share an opportunity so somebody helps us to bring it in? Instead of making our threat smaller, why don't we make our opportunity bigger and enhance it or grow the opportunity by making the likelihood higher or the potential positive impact better? And for those that we can't influence proactively, we could always just accept them with a contingency plan. Let's have contingency plans for good stuff. So when we're surprised that a supplier delivers early, or a price of our raw materials goes down, or regulations change to make things easier, will we have a backup plan ready to take advantage of that opportunity that just happened? So we can have the same kinds of strategies, an aggressive, kill the threat, capture the opportunity, a kind of sharing, transfer the threat, share the opportunity, a change in size, make the threat smaller, the opportunity bigger, or an acceptance strategy. Let's just take the risk and wait and see. What we want to avoid is this. Let's just pretend it's not there. And of course, that's fine for threats. Maybe you'll get lucky. But for opportunities, if they pass us by, it's really unprofessional to miss a chance to save time and money on your project. We're professionals. We're here to improve outcomes, not just to stick our heads in the sand, follow the process, and see where it leads us. We've got to do something proactive. And that means answering this riddle. I'm sure a lot of you maybe will know the answer to this riddle. Here it goes. It's very simple. There are 5 frogs sitting on a log, and 4 decide to jump off. So how many frogs are on the log? And a lot of people would say, well, there's 1 because 4 jumped off, or some people say there's none because the 4 jumping made the log roll and they all fell off. The right answer is 5 because there's a big difference between deciding and doing. They just said, let's jump, and then they sat there and said, okay, we're going to jump. We could do that. We know we've written it in our risk log. This is the action we're going to take, and they do nothing. If you just assess the risk and take no action, if you plan the response and take no action, nothing changes. And the worst thing is you think you've changed it. You write it in the risk log, you file the risk log and say, phew, I've managed all my risks. A month later, you bring the risk log out, you have a look at it, and yes, that happened. We've pre-documented our failures here. That was good. We got that one. Instead of actually jumping and getting the frogs off the log. And sometimes when we jump, we create other problems that also need to be managed proactively. The important thing is to take action. It's not about risk identification. It's not about risk assessment. It's about risk management. And that means doing something different. We need to pay attention to the things that we didn't know now that we know about them. We need to take action in a way that we didn't know we had to before, but now we do. Attention and action are the 2 outcomes of the risk management process. That's what we're there for. So that's simple, isn't it? You could do those things. You could identify opportunities through SWOT analysis or testing your assumptions and constraints. You could use the standard risk thresholds matrix to find the good ones and develop these strategies to capture them and to improve them and to gain those benefits for your project. Now we need to think about the other important half of the PM squared approach, which is perhaps more important than methodology, because all of those methodology things are easy. You could do all of those things now, and I hope you will when you leave this conference. Try it out because it really works. The things that are harder are to change our mindsets. You all know that risk is really bad, don't you? Really? I know he said it, and I know it's quite persuasive, and we laughed a little bit, but basically we do really know that risk is bad, don't we? And we don't really believe that we're going to go and chase down opportunities and find anything that's worth pursuing. Really? That's a mindset. In PM Squared, we have a dual focus: methodology and mindsets. Methodology is what we do to manage the project dimensions. Mindsets is what we think and therefore drives our behavior. And it's really important that we use them together. And this is probably one of the biggest strengths, as other people have said, of the PM Squared approach. It's a methodology with mindsets. Just going through the motions of the methodology isn't enough. We need to believe this stuff. We need to change the way we think, because attitudes affect behaviors. And ultimately, behaviors create culture. It's another ABC, not Brian's ABC, but my ABC. Attitudes shape behavior, repeated behavior forms culture, and culture in turn influences both attitudes and behavior. But we need to get the right attitudes and behavior, and that's what the mindsets are for. There's a phrase in the guide, it says that the mindsets are the glue that holds together the processes and practices, providing a common set of beliefs and values. That's what we need. We need to believe this. Beliefs and values. Values are very deep-seated. So I'm not going to have much time to do this, but let's just think about this mindsets poster and think about how that could affect the way that we think about risk. I want to just pick out a few of these, and I know there's a bigger workshop happening tomorrow. The Managing Risks workshop happens 3 times tomorrow, and Lex has told me he's going to be covering both this upside of risk and also this idea of using the mindsets to help us think differently about risk. First of all, be aware of opportunities. This idea of mindfulness, being present in your project and thinking about the things that could go better than expected, things that might happen that would be nice if they did. Let's be mindful of those things, because you can be sure they exist. Most of us are just blind to them. We're so focused on the work at hand and the potential negative things, we never see the potential upside. Be alert, be aware. Outcomes orientation and being committed is about focusing on objectives. All risks are defined in terms of objectives, but also objectives and value. And visualizing what success would look like and then plan backwards from that. That's the idea of the benefits tree. That's the idea of thinking what could help us to achieve our objectives. Planning in reverse. Position your mind in the future and think back to the present. How could we get to this future from this present? It's very simple to do, being outcomes oriented. Improvement, knowing our strengths and our weaknesses. Using our strengths and addressing our weaknesses. That's something that's really important, both from a personal perspective and from a process perspective. Having a positive, a balanced approach, which includes positive as well as negative, having a can-do attitude, but being realistic. There are things you can do to save time, save money, work faster, smarter, cheaper on your projects. And the risk process doubled up like this gives you a structured way to do it. And finally, sharing knowledge. Talking about the opportunities that you found. Making sure that's shared with other project managers, with others in your team, with your program manager and portfolio manager, your business owner. We found this way of making things easier. Would you like to try it on your project? And gradually, from a kind of bottom-up approach, we'll find that everybody starts looking for opportunities because it really helps us. So I think this mindset piece is really important, and having it laid out for you in this mindset poster is a really helpful part of the PM Squared approach. So that's something we should explore further, because having the right mindset will help us to get risk management right. There's a quote from Louis Pasteur. I won't attempt my French accent, but it says, in the field of observation or of science, hazard or chance favors the prepared mind. If you're looking for it, you'll find it. If you don't look for it, you won't find it. And that's certainly true of opportunities. So mindsets matter because how we think affects how we act. If we have a limited concept of risk, it's always and only bad. That's what we'll look for, and that's what we'll manage. If we have a broader view of risk, it includes both bad and good, positive and negative, then if we think about that, we'll include that in the way we manage it. When we think about the future is risky. And some of us will have this view. It's a big, scary world out there, and it's out to get us. Risky means dangerous. and dangerous means we have to be careful. That's one approach. The other approach, if we say the future is risky, is to say, oh, well, that means challenging. That's great. Maybe we can ride these dragons and actually use them for our own benefit. And the answer is not to be scared and to be cautious, but to be brave and to engage, to roll our sleeves up and engage with the uncertainty and use it and ride those dragons to help us to be more successful. There's no doubt that not all risks are negative. This is the Chinese character for risk, Wei Ji. The top half, Wei, means danger. Ji means opportunity. In Chinese, danger and opportunity together mean risk. So we have this idea that crisis and opportunity are two sides of the same coin. And that's what we find in the PM Squared glossary. That's what we find in best practice risk management around the world. We can manage opportunities. We can use an integrated PM Squared risk process to do it alongside the threats, not because it's in some kind of methodology, but because it really works. It helps us to deliver our projects more successfully, more often. And that is driven by our mindset. A mindset for opportunity will help you to think about the positives alongside the negatives, to adopt a more balanced approach. And when you look for these things, you will find them. So my conclusion with creating silver linings is that life is risky. Your projects are risky. But if we use PM Squared in this way, extending the risk process in line with the glossary and best practice, we can create silver linings even in our most risky projects. I encourage you to try it. Thank you very much.